At 11:59 p.m. on my 39th birthday, my apartment echoed like a museum after hours, polished floors, expensive silence, nothing alive. No calls, no messages, only the faint hum of the fridge and a candle collapsing on a store-bought cupcake. Then my phone lit up, photos of my brother Grant, champagne in hand, our parents glowing behind him. A family thread I wasn't meant to see pulsed beneath. Nora can chip in $25,000. She just got her bonus. They hadn't forgotten me. They had erased me. And in that erasure, something inside me snapped awake. The lobby of my apartment building gleamed under fluorescent light, marble floors echoing back each tired click of my heels. My body ached with the weight of 14 hours spent selling someone else's vision, polishing someone else's reputation, but I couldn't deny the rush. The client had shaken my hand so hard, my knuckles were still red, his voice full of gratitude. Horizon Brands would send me the official numbers tomorrow, but the email had already arrived, my bonus for the last campaign. $85,000, proof that my work mattered to someone, proof that I wasn't invisible everywhere. But as I stepped into the elevator, that thought hollowed out. 39 years old, a senior director in public relations, standing in mirrored walls that reflected exhaustion more than celebration. My birthday, and the only candle waiting for me, was the one drooping on a cupcake I'd bought myself that morning. I whispered happy birthday under my breath as the doors slid shut, the words so fragile they seemed to vanish in the air-conditioned hum. Inside my apartment, the silence pressed harder. I kicked off my heels, dropped my leather bag by the sofa, and scanned the room for something alive. Nothing. The cake on the coffee table stared back like a sad-eyed child, its single candle slouching in surrender. I set my laptop down, planning to distract myself with work, maybe draft another proposal, but my fingers betrayed me. They opened my social feed instead. The screen lit with images that stabbed my brother Grant, glass of champagne raised high, our parents glowing beside him under a banner that screamed, "Promotion." The caption from my father, Charles, pulsed like a gavel. "Proud of our star." My mother, Linda, chimed in beneath, "The Blake legacy continues." Photo after photo scrolled down my screen, cousins, aunts, uncles, everyone assembled for Grant's triumph, everyone but me. The air in my lungs turned brittle. They hadn't forgotten my birthday. They had chosen to celebrate someone else instead, like always. My mind reeled back, uninvited, to the years stacked like brittle plates. Age 11, sitting at a restaurant table alone, a slice of cake sweating under the candle, while my family stayed longer at Grant's debate competition. They promised they'd be back in time. They weren't. Age 17, sent to Grandma's house on my birthday weekend so my parents could tour Yale with him. Dad's words sharp as chalk on a board. "It's his future, Nora. Be understanding." College graduation. The dinner meant for me hijacked by Grant's engagement announcement. My summa cum laude honours reduced to background noise as relatives clamoured for wedding venues. The memories clung like thorns, and now they bled fresh. My phone buzzed, breaking the spiral. "Mom," the screen read. For half a second, hope pricked, the irrational, childlike belief that maybe she remembered. I swiped. "Nora, darling," Linda's voice sparkled, sugar over steel. "I'm so glad I caught you. We're planning something special for Grant and Jessica's anniversary next month. Could you help with catering and decorations? You're so good at that." My throat tightened. "Mom," I said softly, "today's my birthday." A pause, a beat too long. Then her laugh, airy, dismissive. "Oh, honey, with everything happening for your brother, it just slipped my mind. But you understand." The line went dead after her cheerful goodbye, leaving me with the steady tick of the wall clock, counting down the final minutes of my birthday. I stared at the cake, at the candle leaning like it had already given up, and something inside me shifted, tectonic, undeniable. I reopened my laptop, this time not to scroll, but before the browser refreshed, a notification appeared. Charles added you to family circle. Confused, I clicked. A chat thread sprawled open. Dad. Grant's anniversary gift needs to be significant, at least $25,000. Mom. Nora just got her bonus, time she supports the family for once. My name appeared, spelled correctly but cold, like a ledger entry. The words blurred for a moment, then sharpened. I wasn't invisible after all. I was useful, as long as I paid. The cupcake candle bent farther, wax pooling into the cardboard tray. And I realized, with a clarity that seared, my family hadn't simply forgotten me. They had written me into the story only when my money could fund the ending they wanted. The words in the family thread burned themselves into my brain, each syllable like acid dripping on stone. For a while, I just sat on the couch, fists clenched, pulse loud in my ears. The sting of being overlooked had always been sharp, but this was different. This was deliberate. A ledger line with my name on it, my worth reduced to dollars. The ache in my chest hardened into something hotter, denser, anger. The next morning, the office greeted me with its usual buzz, glass walls gleaming under Chicago sunlight. Horizon brands pulsed with energy, the hum of ideas, the clatter of deadlines. My colleagues smiled, offered nods of respect as I passed. Even after nearly a decade, I still felt a small jolt at being seen here, valued here. "Morning, Nora," Jules called from her office, her curls bouncing as she waved. At the far end of the hall, Ethan Park, our CEO, stopped me. "Westfield numbers came in," he said, handing me a folder. 41% revenue increase this quarter. That's on you. The board is thrilled. His smile reached his eyes, his voice steady with pride. For a moment my throat tightened. Here, I was more than a bank account. Here, my work rewrote balance sheets, not family obligations. I thanked him and carried the folder back to my office, the weight of it both grounding and liberating. My phone buzzed against the desk, a new email. I opened it, expecting another client update. Instead, my brother's name appeared in bold. Subject, do the right thing. My stomach dropped. Against my better judgment, I clicked. "Nora," it began, "you know how important family is. You got that big bonus, and Mum and Dad said you'd help out with Grant and Jessica's anniversary. It's only fair. You've been successful. Now it's time to share that success. Do the right thing. Our family needs you." No mention of my birthday. No acknowledgement of me as a person, only as a resource. My eyes traced the words again and again until they blurred. I leaned back in my chair, leather creaking beneath me. The Chicago skyline stretched wide outside the glass, steel and light soaring into the sky. My reflection in the window stared back, green eyes sharp with realization. I was never invisible to them. I was currency. That night, back in my apartment, the cupcake still waited on the coffee table. The candle slumped further, the frosting stiffened, the sprinkles dulled. I sat cross-legged on the sofa, laptop balanced on my knees, staring at the glow of the screen. Work files blinked in folders, but my mind was elsewhere. Memories spilled like water through cracks. Age 12, sitting in a diner booth, the candle flickering down to a nub as I waited for a family who never arrived. The waitress refilled my soda 3 times, her pitying eyes the only witness. Age 17. Grandma's house smelled of mothballs and lavender, her arthritic hands pressing coins into mine while she whispered apologies. She'd baked me a pie, but even she couldn't mask the truth. I'd been sent away because Grant's Yale tour mattered more. College graduation. I'd walked across the stage. Honours stole heavy around my shoulders. But the applause had barely faded before Mom tapped a spoon against her glass at dinner, announcing Grant's engagement. The conversation swerved. My name fell into silence. The memories stacked themselves higher, heavier, until I could hardly breathe under them. I looked at the email again, at Grant's casual entitlement, the assumption that I would, of course, pay. My finger hovered over the delete key. Instead, I archived it, letting it sit there like evidence in a courtroom drawer. Because something inside me had shifted, the ache had hardened into steel. They thought I would always bend, always smooth the edges, always swallow the neglect. But the truth had never been clearer. My family didn't forget me. They had chosen to erase me, except when my bank account could play the starring role. The cupcake candle had bent so far it nearly snapped. I blew it out anyway, not for a wish, but as a declaration. This year I wasn't going to wait for them to remember me. This year I would remember myself. The crisis broke just after sunrise, the kind of firestorm that would have sent a weaker team scrambling. A client's product recall had gone public overnight, headlines multiplying faster than the damage could be contained. My phone buzzed on the nightstand before I'd even finished my first cup of coffee. By 8 o'clock, I was at Horizon's glass-walled conference room, sleeves rolled, voice steady. I built the framework of our response like muscle memory. Contain, clarify, control. By mid-morning, the worst of the storm had been redirected. Reporters repeated our talking points instead of the client's mistakes, and analysts began spinning it as a model of transparency. The client's CEO shook my hand hard enough to bruise. "You saved us," he whispered, relief flooding his face. The adrenaline lingered even after I returned to my office. I felt sharp, alive, every nerve humming with the knowledge that I'd steered $1 million account away from ruin. On my desk, the Westfield file lay open like a trophy. This was the space where I existed fully, where my skills carved meaning into the chaos. Then my phone buzzed, a message from Grant. The name froze me for a beat. Against better judgment, I opened it. Need Region Texas CMO contact. Dinner tomorrow. Important investor pitch. Family helping family. I stared at the words until they blurred. My stomach clenched, not from surprise, but from the weary familiarity. He wasn't asking, he was assuming. The way he always did. I set the phone down and leaned back in my chair. The skyline outside glittered in the weak winter sun, Chicago's steel rising tall and unapologetic. A question pressed against my ribs. Should I send the contact? Let him siphon from my network again? Should I keep the peace? I thought of last night's email, the one demanding I do the right thing. The ache of being reduced to a wallet had barely cooled, and already he was back, clawing at what wasn't his. My hand hovered over the phone, torn between muscle memory and defiance. I closed my eyes, exhaling. The sound of knuckles rapped lightly at my door. "You alive in there?" Jules's voice floated in, cheerful but edged with curiosity. She stepped inside, balancing 2 coffees. "You saved the Westfield account and forgot to save yourself caffeine." She slid one across my desk. "Thanks," I said, wrapping chilled fingers around the warm paper cup. Her eyes narrowed as she studied me. "What's with the storm cloud face? You should be glowing." I hesitated. Jules was blunt, always had been since our first week of training together. But that bluntness was safe. So I told her. About Grant's text, about the constant demands dressed as family loyalty. She whistled low. "Classic. He doesn't see you. He sees leverage." The words scraped something raw. That night, after hours of reports and debriefs, I found myself in apartment 3C, the familiar scent of butter and cinnamon drifting out as Mrs. Whitaker opened the door. At 85, her back bent, but her spirit fierce, she'd become my Tuesday ritual, cookies and conversation in her kitchen with its checkered tablecloth. "You look troubled, Nora," she said, pressing a plate of oatmeal cookies into my hands. I told her about the text, about the endless cycle, about the family thread that spoke of me only when money was at stake. She listened, nodding slowly, her gnarled hands folded neatly on the table. "Finally," she said, "some parents don't really see their children. They see the mirror. They want their reflection walking around the world." The words landed heavy, then sharp, slicing through the fog. It wasn't forgetfulness, it wasn't neglect, it was erasure. They had chosen to erase me from the family portrait unless I reflected them back in ways that suited. My chest tightened as I looked at the crumbs gathering on my plate. The ache inside me deepened, no longer just the sting of absence, but the cut of deliberate exclusion. For the first time, I let myself name it. They weren't forgetting me. They were writing me out on purpose. Back in my apartment that night, the city lights shimmered across the river, their reflections sharp and fractured, like me. I set my phone on the table, staring at Grant's message still glowing on the screen. My thumb hovered, the old instinct urging me to give in, to make peace, to disappear for the sake of harmony. But harmony had never been real. It was silence forced over my voice. I opened a new message and typed, "I can't share that contact. You'll need to reach out through proper channels." My hand trembled, but I pressed send. The screen went still, the message delivered. No lightning bolt struck, no world collapsed, just quiet, charged and unfamiliar. For the first time in years, I had told my brother no. I exhaled, a shaky laugh breaking out of me. It wasn't joy, it was something harder, steelier. Pulling out my laptop, I opened a real estate search. Lake Michigan houses lit the screen, wide decks, pine trees, glass walls catching the sun, homes that looked like spines, upright, strong. I bookmarked 3. My cursor lingered over the calendar app. Appointments clicked into place. A viewing this weekend, a meeting with a financial advisor, and a call to a lawyer about setting up a living trust. If my family only saw me as a wallet, then my first act of rebellion would be locking that wallet, not against the world, but against them. The next day, sunlight poured through the tall windows at Horizon, washing everything in gold. The crisis I'd handled was already being dissected in the press, praise echoing back to the firm. Ethan stopped by again, dropping a congratulatory note on my desk, his words short but sincere. Jules appeared a moment later, leaning against the doorframe with her ever-watchful eyes. "You look different," she said. "Different how?" "Like someone just pulled a thorn out." I smirked, sipping my coffee. Maybe I did. Her gaze sharpened. What did Grant want this time? I hesitated. Jules had been beside me for years, through deadlines, sleepless nights, and the quiet moments in between. She could read me better than anyone, so I told her the request, my refusal, the plan I was beginning to sketch. She whistled low. "Finally, about damn time you stopped feeding the parasite." She sank into the chair opposite my desk, her expression shifting. "But you need to be careful." Something in her tone made my stomach tighten. "Careful about what?" She pulled out her phone, scrolling. "I have a friend over at Stratagem, the rival firm. She told me your family reached out last week. Not Grant, your parents. They wanted dirt on Horizon's clients. Said it was urgent. My friend didn't bite, but word gets around." The floor seemed to tilt under me. "They contacted a competitor?" Jules nodded grimly. "Look, I can't say what game they're playing, but it smells like leverage. Maybe they think they can scare you into falling back in line. Maybe they're desperate to control your bonus, your name, your network. Either way, they're trying to drag you into something messy." My chest tightened, breath catching sharp. The betrayal cut deeper than the forgotten birthdays, deeper than the cupcake waiting in silence. This wasn't absence anymore. This was sabotage. I rubbed my temples, pulse hammering. Why would they do this? Why now? Jules leaned forward, her voice steady. "Because they know you're pulling away. Families like yours don't let go quietly." The words slid into me, cold and heavy. The decision to buy a house to create a trust had started as an act of protection. Now it felt like survival. I looked out the window, the skyline jagged and unyielding. For years, I'd thought of myself as erased, a ghost in their story. But now, I realized, I was something else entirely, a threat to their script. My phone buzzed again, a reply from Grant finally blinking across the screen. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be. We're family. We need you." I let the message sit unopened. My fingers returned to the laptop, pulling up listings, zooming in on wide decks and glass walls that reflected light instead of shadows. Each click steadied me. If they were building traps, I would build walls stronger than any they had imagined. Not to isolate, but to protect the only thing they had never safeguarded: me. The Saturday sky stretched pale and brittle, the kind of cold light that sharpened every edge of Lake Michigan's horizon. I wrapped my scarf tighter as the realtor's SUV pulled up, tires crunching over gravel. 3 houses on the itinerary, 3 chances to imagine a different life. The first one, a modern cube of glass and metal, looked promising in photos. In person, it felt sterile, like an art installation nobody lived in. The floors gleamed too hard, the rooms echoing like a warehouse. I walked through it politely, nodding at the realtor's practiced spiel, but the air in my lungs stayed thin. The second was older, a Victorian with peeling paint and a porch sagging like tired shoulders. Charm, the realtor called it. Neglect, my eyes answered. Inside, the smell of mildew curled through every corner, and I knew instantly it would devour me with repairs. I left without stepping into the kitchen. By the third house, my hopes were low. But the moment the front door swung open, something in my chest shifted. The air smelled faintly of cedar. Sunlight spilled across polished wooden floors, wide windows catching the shimmer of the lake just beyond the pines. A stone fireplace stood solid at the centre, as if it had been waiting for someone to come sit, to breathe. I walked through the rooms, slowly, hand brushing over smooth banisters, eyes tracing the view. 4 bedrooms, each with its own window framing the water. A deck wrapping 3 sides, wide enough for chairs, maybe a long table. I imagined coffee steaming in the morning chill, a book open in my lap as gulls wheeled above. The realtor's voice droned with details, square footage, renovations, motivated sellers. I hardly heard her. For the first time in weeks, maybe years, my body felt aligned, like vertebrae clicking into place. This house had a spine, and standing inside it, so did I. I paused at the wide glass doors overlooking the lake. My reflection caught faintly in the glass, layered over rippling water. 39 years of birthdays ignored, of being sidelined, of swallowing hurt, I saw them all in that reflection. And for the first time, I saw a woman standing upright. My reverie broke when the realtor cleared her throat. "Funny thing," she said casually. "Your parents called about this property last week." The words froze me. "I'm sorry, what?" She smiled, flipping through her notes. "Yes, Charles and Linda Blake. They asked if it was still available, said they were considering it as a vacation home for their son." My stomach dropped. "For Grant?" She nodded. "That's what they mentioned, but they never followed up, so it's still open." The room spun slightly. Of all the houses on the lake, of all the listings, of course my parents had circled this one for him. Even here, even in this sanctuary I had just begun to imagine, his shadow reached first. I pressed my palm against the cool glass door, forcing my breath steady. They wanted this for him. They hadn't even thought to ask if I wanted something for myself. The realtor kept talking, price, financing options, closing timeline, but her words faded beneath the rush in my ears. It wasn't just a house anymore. It was a battle line. I turned back, scanning the sunlight spilling across the floor, the steady stone fireplace, the view of the lake I could already feel in my bones. This was mine. Not because they wanted it for him, but because for the first time I wanted it for me. "I'll take it," I heard myself say, the words sharp, almost foreign. The realtor blinked. "Would you like to think about it first?" "No." My voice steadied, stronger this time. "I know." The lake glimmered beyond the glass, water catching the light like a promise. Whatever came next, however ugly, however loud, this house would hold. A spine strong enough for both of us. The papers slid across the polished oak desk, one signature after another, etching my claim into permanence. My hand didn't tremble. The realtor's smile widened, impressed by the speed. But she didn't know I had spent 39 years waiting for this moment. Each initial, each pen stroke felt like chiseling away the chains of invisibility. When the final page was signed, the keys landed in my palm with a satisfying weight. "This house is yours now," the lawyer said, voice calm, procedural. I closed my hand around the keys. Mine. Not because my parents chose it for grant, not because it was convenient, because I chose it, and for once, that was enough. I left the office and drove straight to the lake. The house stood quiet, waiting, its windows catching the late afternoon sun like open eyes. Unlocking the door, I stepped inside alone. No family to cut ribbons, no champagne toast, no forced smiles. Just silence, warm, not suffocating. The first thing I unpacked wasn't a box of dishes or clothes. It was the letter from my grandmother, folded soft at the creases. I slid it into a frame and hung it in the hallway where the morning light would find it. Her handwriting slanted across the page. "Don't let the girl learn to disappear just to be loved." The words settled over the house like a blessing, like a command. Next came my laptop and the call to the attorney. Together, we finalized the living trust, walls of legal language rising around the property like armor. No one could touch this place, not as collateral, not as leverage, not as another sacrifice to the family. If my parents ever tried, they'd find iron gates instead of open doors. I wandered through the rooms, barefoot on the wood floors, picturing each corner filled with pieces of myself. My degrees framed and hung, not stuffed in boxes. Photographs of moments I owned, team celebrations, late-night victories, even quiet sunsets no one else cared to witness. A life built on choices they never celebrated, but choices that were mine. At dusk, I stepped onto the deck with a glass of wine, the lake stretching infinite in front of me. For the first time in memory, my shoulders eased. No expectations pressed down, no siblings standing brighter beside me. Just me, standing tall against the horizon. On impulse, I snapped a photo. My bare feet on the cedar boards, glass raised, the lake behind me painted gold. Captioned it simply, "Weekend at my new lake house. Birthday gift to myself." I hit post before doubt could intervene. The phone buzzed within minutes, notifications piled high, comments from colleagues and friends cheering, celebrating, congratulating. For once, I was the headline in my own story. But beneath the flood of support came another current. My cousin Elaine's text popped up first. "Where did you get money for a place like that?" Then another from an aunt. "Is this wise, Nora? What about family responsibilities?" By morning, the group thread blazed. "She's hiding money. She bought a lake house and didn't tell anyone. She's destroying the family's image." I read each line in silence, jaw tight. It didn't matter how much I had earned it, how transparent the bonus, how clear the paperwork. To them, my success was treason. The last message landed like a gavel, my father's name stamped across the screen. "See me tomorrow at your office. We need to talk." The words sat heavy, not as a request but a summons. He had marched into my childhood birthdays, into my graduations, into every space I tried to claim. Now he wanted to march into my professional sanctuary. I set the phone down, staring at the lake. My grandmother's letter hung behind me, silent but resolute. This house was mine, this choice was mine, and tomorrow, when my father walked into my world, he would find someone different waiting for him, someone with a spine as steady as the beams holding this house. He arrived just before noon, a storm wrapped in a tailored suit. The receptionist's voice crackled over the intercom. "Mr. Charles Blake is here to see you." My pulse skipped. My father had never once stepped foot inside Horizon Brands. He didn't visit my office when I was promoted, didn't congratulate me when the firm made me senior director. But now he was here, uninvited, unannounced, carrying the authority of a man who expected doors to part at his presence. He didn't wait for me to fetch him. The glass doors swung open and he strode down the hall, shoulders broad, silver hair immaculate, his eyes sharp as knives. Conversations in cubicles faltered as his voice carried. "Nora!" I met him halfway, forcing my steps steady. "Dad, this isn't a good time." He waved off the words like gnats. "We need to talk. Now." "Then we'll use a meeting room." My voice clipped, professional. I refused to let him hijack the office floor. Inside the small conference room, he closed the door with a decisive snap. "Your mother and I saw the pictures. A lake house? Without telling us? Do you have any idea what that looks like to the family?" "I bought it with my bonus," I said evenly. "That money could have supported your brother. You think about yourself while the family needs you. We raised you better than this." I wanted to laugh. Raised me better. They hadn't raised me at all, only shadowed me with Grant's light. Instead, I steadied my voice. "I'm in the middle of a crisis campaign. If you're here to demand a donation, you'll have to wait." His jaw clenched. "Family comes first, Nora." I slid the client file across the table. "This account is worth $3 million. If I don't fix this today, dozens of employees will lose their jobs. That's family too." For once, he didn't have a retort. His silence lasted a beat too long, his face darkening with something that looked less like power and more like frustration. "I'll see you tonight," he finally said, voice low with warning. "Dinner, 7 sharp." He left before I could answer, his footsteps echoing through the hall like a gavel. The Blake mansion glowed that evening, windows spilling golden light across the trimmed lawn. I parked at the curb, the 3 photo albums heavy in my bag. They felt less like scrapbooks and more like weapons. Inside, the dining room gleamed with silver candlesticks and china reserved for appearances. My mother fluttered around the table, pearls at her throat, voice chirping with brittle cheer. Grant and Jessica sat at the far end, glasses of wine in hand, their smiles picture perfect. "Nora," my mother exclaimed, "we made your favourite. Beef Wellington." It hadn't been my favourite since high school. It was Grant's. I slid into my seat, back straight, face unreadable. My father cleared his throat, the room falling obediently silent. "We're here because of your decision. Buying that house without consulting us. It reflects poorly." My fork remained untouched. It was my decision to make. He leaned forward, voice heavy. "We expect you to contribute $20,000 for Grant and Jessica's anniversary celebration. It's appropriate considering your windfall." The words coiled through the air, smug and practiced. My mother nodded vigorously. "Family supports family, darling." The ache inside me turned sharp. Slowly, deliberately, I reached into my bag and placed the first album on the table. "Turn to page 6, I said. Confusion flickered across their faces, but Grant obeyed. The photograph showed him at 8, blowing out candles on a cake the size of a small mountain, surrounded by relatives, piles of wrapped gifts stacked high. Every page that followed mirrored the same. Balloons, parties, professional photos, year after year. Gasps circled the table. My mother's hand fluttered to her pearls. Then I placed the second album beside it. Its pages flipped under the chandelier's glow, mostly blank. A few scattered shots, me at a kitchen table with a cupcake, Grandma's wrinkled hand on my shoulder. Entire years missing, entire celebrations erased. The silence grew so heavy it pressed on my chest. No one moved, no one spoke. Even my father's face faltered for a fraction of a second. Album 1, abundance. Album 2, absence. The contrast said, everything I didn't have to. For once in my life, the room belonged to me. The silence thickened around the table, cut only by the faint clink of a fork dropped against porcelain. I reached once more into my bag, sliding out a manila folder, its edges worn from the hours I'd spent combing through it. These, I said evenly, are family expenses over the last 20 years. Tuition, vacations, cars, gifts. I spread the sheets across the table like cards in a rigged game. The numbers glared beneath the chandelier. Grant's column fat and indulgent, mine lean, skeletal. Thousands poured into his education, trips across Europe, birthday bashes. My line trailed in shadows, community college classes covered mostly by scholarships, birthdays reduced to grocery store cupcakes, vacations cancelled or skipped. My father's face hardened, but I pressed on. From the folder, I drew a single sheet, the ink faded with time. "And this is from Grandma," I said. Gasps rippled down the table as I unfolded the letter, setting it where the candlelight touched her words. Her handwriting slanted but firm. "Don't let the girl learn to disappear just to be loved." My throat ached as I spoke. "She saw it. She begged you not to let me fade, but you did." Linda's hand flew to her mouth, eyes misting. The sound that escaped her wasn't grief, but performance. Soft, delicate sobs that carried no weight in her gaze. She dabbed at her eyes with a napkin, mascara unbroken. Charles shifted in his chair, his authority fraying. Finally, he snapped, "This family needed stability. We needed a standard bearer. That's why Grant was invested in. A family name needs a successor." The words hit with surgical cruelty, confirming what I had known all along. Not forgotten, sacrificed, not neglected, dismissed. I had been written out of their story so the air could shine brighter. "Do you hear yourself?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. "You didn't just choose him. You erased me." For the first time, Grant stirred. His hand hovered over one of the photos in his album, the one I'd marked earlier. He flipped it toward himself. There he was at 6, grinning at a mountain of gifts, and behind him, half-shadowed in the corner, was me, small, smiling with lips pressed tight, eyes already hollow with knowing. His fingers lingered on the page. The confident tilt of his chin faltered. "Grant," I said quietly, "you didn't even notice, did you?" His eyes flicked up, meeting mine, uncertainty flashing like a crack in polished glass. Charles bristled. "This is pointless melodrama. You were always difficult, Nora. You should be grateful for what you were given." I pushed my chair back, the scrape loud against the hardwood. What was I given? Silence, absence, being told again and again that my worth depended on what I could provide for you. My mother sniffled theatrically, murmuring, "Don't make a scene, darling, it's unbecoming." I rose fully, the albums still sprawled across the table, the evidence of decades laid bare. A scene? No, this is history, and for once you don't get to rewrite it. I closed the folder of expenses but left the albums and Grandma's letter in place. They didn't belong to me anymore. They belonged to the courtroom I had turned their dinner table into. Grant's gaze followed me as I walked toward the door. His face was pale, his posture unsettled, as if for the first time he saw not just his spotlight, but the shadows that fed it. At the threshold I paused, hand on the frame. "Those albums," I said softly, are the black boxes from a crash you refuse to see. Consider them my gift to the family. Then I opened the door. The night air rushed in, cool and sharp, a contrast to the stifling weight of the dining room. Behind me, the silence cracked, not with words, not yet, but with the tremor of a foundation shaken. I stepped into the darkness, the house glowing behind me like a stage where the actors had just forgotten their lines. For once, I didn't stay to fill the silence. The fallout came faster than I expected. By Monday morning, whispers snaked through the family network like wildfire. My cousin Elaine called first, her voice syrupy with fake concern. "People are saying you've lost it, Nora, buying a lake house like that, storming out of dinner. Everyone thinks you're jealous." Jealous. The word sat bitter in my mouth long after I ended the call. Soon other messages trickled in, some accusing, some pitying, all circling the same narrative. I was unhinged, I was unstable, I was trying to outshine Grant. The rumours spread as easily as air. At first the sting was sharp. My body remembered the reflex to defend, to explain, to beg for understanding. But instead of reacting, I started building something else. On Tuesday, I scheduled my first therapy appointment. Dr. Levine, kind-eyed and sharp-minded, welcomed me into her office with its soft lamplight and worn leather chairs. She listened as I unravelled the thread of years, birthdays erased, accomplishments overshadowed, my family's demands disguised as loyalty. She nodded, not with pity but with recognition. Naming the pain gave it shape. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't crazy. By Thursday, I laced up running shoes I hadn't touched in months. The lake path stretched before me, crisp air filling my lungs as my feet pounded a rhythm. The motion burned, but it was a fire I chose. Each mile cleared more space inside me. I wasn't running away anymore. I was running toward. At work, I leaned deeper into connections I had always kept professional. Jules dragged me to after-hours drinks with colleagues, laughter spilling over pint glasses. For once, I let myself stay instead of retreating home to silence. Bit by bit, a new network sprouted. Friends who knew me not as an accessory to a family legacy, but as someone worth showing up for. Weeks later, my lake house filled with that same warmth. I hosted a small housewarming, inviting only those who celebrated my existence without strings attached. Jules brought wine, Ethan arrived with a carefully chosen gift, even Mrs. Whittaker shuffled in carrying a tin of cookies. The deck buzzed with voices, clinking glasses and laughter that didn't feel borrowed. I snapped photos, not for proof, but for memory. Jules doubled over laughing at a joke, Mrs. Whittaker showing Ethan how to fold napkins properly, the lake glowing in twilight behind us. Each image felt like patching a hole in a fabric long torn. For once the album wouldn't be empty. As the night deepened, I slipped away to the deck, wineglass in hand. The sounds of laughter spilled behind me, mixing with the gentle lap of water against the shore. My phone buzzed on the railing. A new message blinked. It was from Grant. "We need to talk. Alone." The words made my stomach twist. My first instinct was to ignore it, to throw the phone back inside and drown in the joy of the evening. But fear prickled sharp. What if this was a setup? What if he wanted to drag me back into the family machine? I read the text again, slower this time. The tone wasn't demanding. It wasn't layered with entitlement like before. It was bare, almost pleading. Inside, Jules called my name, asking if I wanted dessert. I answered distractedly, eyes still on the glowing screen. The laughter from the kitchen seemed far away now, muffled by the rush of blood in my ears. Was I walking into a trap? Or was there something in Grant's message that hinted at cracks forming in his polished facade? The glass in my hand trembled as I typed back, "Fine, tomorrow, public place." I hit send before doubt could claw it back. The lake stretched dark and endless before me, stars scattering across its surface. Behind me, my chosen family toasted, laughed, built something sturdy in the hollows of my life. Ahead of me, Grant waited, a shadow from the old world, asking for an audience. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of the conversation, only wary, and that difference mattered. We met at a cafe downtown, the kind with tall windows fogged by the cold and the hum of espresso machines filling the silence between conversations. I arrived first, choosing a table tucked in the corner where I could see both the door and the street beyond. Old habits of self-protection. Grant walked in 10 minutes later, his shoulders squared but his eyes betraying exhaustion. He looked less like the golden heir tonight, more like a man carrying a weight too heavy for his own spine. "Thanks for coming," he said, sliding into the seat opposite me. I folded my arms, my voice steady. "You said it was important." He hesitated, then leaned forward, lowering his tone. "Do you ever feel like you didn't choose any of this? Like the family chose for you?" The question startled me. For years, Grant had basked in the glow, the endless investment, the unshakable pride of our parents. But now his voice cracked faintly under the words. "They made me into a symbol," he continued, eyes fixed on the table. "The perfect son, the Blake legacy, every choice, college, career, even Jessica, they framed it as duty. I thought it was privilege, but it's a cage, Nora, and I can't step outside it without everything crumbling." For a flicker of a moment I saw him, not the rival, not the centre of attention, but the boy who had also been trapped. My chest tightened, sympathy warring with anger. "And yet," I said slowly, "you still let them erase me. You watched it happen." He winced. "I know, I didn't fight it because fighting would have broken the image they built. But I see it now, and I'm sorry." The words should have soothed, but instead they ached like pressing on a bruise. Too little, too late. Grant straightened, resolve hardening in his eyes. "Look, I need to ask you something, for everyone's sake. Sell the lake house, or transfer it to me. If you keep it, this family will never recover. It's tearing everything apart." The sympathy in my chest turned to ash. "So that's what this is really about." "Nora, please. You don't understand how much pressure Dad's under, how much the family name—" I cut him off. "The family name has cost me 39 years of silence. This house is mine. It's not up for negotiation." He reached for my hand, desperate now. "We can keep the peace if you just let this go." I pulled my hand back. The cafe noise swelled around us, milk steaming, plates clattering, the murmur of strangers who would never know the battlefield playing out in our corner. For years, I had been the one to keep the peace, to smooth the edges, to swallow myself whole. Not anymore. That night, back at the lake house, I pulled out the trust documents. My attorney's number blinked in my contacts. I called, voice firm. "I want to add an addendum, ironclad. No Blake family member can ever use this property as collateral, inheritance, or claim. It's non-transferable, ever." The next day, papers arrived. I signed them in ink that didn't shake. Each signature was a shield, each clause a wall. By the time I set the pen down, the house was more than mine. It was untouchable. Still, the ache lingered. My brother's apology replayed in my head, tangled with his plea. He was a prisoner too, but one who had eaten well inside gilded bars while I starved in the dark. I couldn't unsee that imbalance. I walked the deck that evening. The lake spread dark and endless before me. The air bit cold, the kind of cold that clears the mind. My grandmother's letter hung just inside, reminding me, "Don't let the girl learn to disappear, just to be loved." I hadn't disappeared, not this time. But the cost of standing tall was heavy, and I carried it alone beneath the stars. The morning of my 40th birthday broke, with a pale gold sunrise spilling across Lake Michigan. I stood barefoot on the deck of my house, the chill of the wood against my skin, grounding me in a way no party or banner ever had. My phone buzzed with a stream of messages from colleagues, clients, friends I had carefully gathered into my orbit. For once, the weight in my chest wasn't dread, but something lighter. 2 days earlier, Ethan had called me into his office. His smile had been rare, genuine. "Congratulations, Nora. The board unanimously approved. You're officially Vice President of Public Relations." The promotion was more than a title. It was proof that the years I spent fighting to be seen had built something unshakable outside the Blake name. I hadn't just survived, I had risen. By afternoon, the lake house filled with people who knew me not as an afterthought, but as a force. Jules arrived first, carrying balloons that tangled themselves in the ceiling beams. Ethan came with his wife, setting a bottle of champagne on the counter. Colleagues trickled in, voices rising with laughter, the deck swelling with energy. Even Mrs. Whittaker appeared, escorted by a neighbour, a tin of cookies clutched proudly in her hands. The grill smoked with steaks, music floated from a speaker, and glasses clinked as toasts filled the air. "To Nora," Jules declared, raising her glass, "for teaching us all what it means to stand tall. Even when the people who should have lifted her tried to weigh her down." Cheers erupted, a chorus that warmed me more than any candlelit cake had in my childhood. I let the words wash over me, not shrinking, not apologizing, simply absorbing them like oxygen. As twilight deepened, painting the sky in shades of lavender and rose, I stepped aside, leaning against the railing with my glass. For once, I wasn't alone in solitude. The house behind me pulsed with laughter, with belonging. Then I heard it, tires crunching on gravel, doors slamming. A hush fell over the deck as heads turned. Grant stood at the edge of the crowd, a wrapped package in his hands. He looked different, shoulders drawn, eyes shadowed. He didn't stride in with confidence this time. He lingered, awkward, waiting for permission. The air tightened. Jules shifted closer to me, protective, but I raised a hand. "It's fine." Grant walked forward, the package pressed against his chest. When he reached me, he hesitated. "Happy birthday, Nora." The words were simple, but something in his tone cracked. He extended the gift. My hands closed around it, the weight unfamiliar. I peeled back the wrapping slowly, aware of every eye on us. Inside was a framed photograph. At first my mind couldn't place it. Then recognition struck. Me, 7 years old, perched on the old tire swing that used to hang from the oak tree in our backyard. My head thrown back mid-laugh, sunlight catching my hair. Alone, no Grant, no parents, no orchestrated perfection, just me, captured in joy. I stared, throat tight. "Where did you get this?" "Dad kept boxes in the attic," Grant said quietly. "I found it, had it restored." His voice trembled. "You existed, Nora, even when they wouldn't see you, and you deserve to be remembered." The twist hit me harder than any accusation. The brother who had always been the symbol, the heir, was offering me proof that I had mattered all along. A photo not of erasure, but of presence. Tears blurred the edges of the frame. Around us the silence thickened, not hostile, but reverent. For the first time, Grant wasn't the golden boy towering over me. He was just my brother, holding out a piece of my stolen childhood. I swallowed hard, words tangled in my chest. "Thank you." He nodded once, eyes glossy, and for a heartbeat, I believed something fragile had shifted between us. Ashes glowing faintly, hinting at the possibility of embers. The photograph still rested in my lap, my fingers tracing the frame as though the image might vanish if I let go. Behind me, the party murmured back to life, voices softer now, reverent with the weight of what had just passed. Grant drifted toward the kitchen, leaving me alone on the deck beneath the string lights that swayed in the breeze. That's when I heard the doorbell. Conversation faltered, shoes scuffed against the floor. And then the sliding door opened again, spilling light onto the deck. My mother stood there, clutching a small white box as if it were fragile enough to shatter in her hands. She looked smaller than I remembered, her usual perfection dimmed. No pearls, no stage tears, no grand entrance, just Linda, eyes tired, shoulders trembling. She stepped forward, the box shaking slightly as she extended it to me. I brought this," she whispered. I took it carefully, opening the lid. Inside sat a single carrot cupcake, its frosting swirled clumsily, a lone candle tucked beside it, my chest constricted. "You always liked carrot cake, didn't you?" she asked, voice low, almost tentative. "Yes," I said, the word breaking softly. She swallowed hard. "Happy birthday, Nora." It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't rehearsed. It was halting, real, almost raw. For a moment the years of absence and neglect swirled like ghosts around us. But she was here, not to demand, not to redirect, but simply to offer. I nodded slowly. "Thank you, Mom." Then before the silence could turn heavy, I added, "Come in, have some cake with us." Her eyes widened, relief rushing into them. She stepped inside, and for the first time in years, my mother sat at a table with me, not as an audience to grant, but as a guest in my world. Yet as I set the cupcake on the counter, I made sure the boundaries held. "This doesn't change the past," I said gently, "and it doesn't mean I'll be giving up the house or my independence. If you want to be part of my life, it has to be here, on my terms." Linda's hands twisted in her lap. She nodded, slowly, painfully. "I understand." The room settled into a fragile rhythm. Jules passed plates, Mrs. Whitaker shared cookies, laughter flickered back into the air like timid flames. The celebration continued, not grand, but real. Later, when the guests had left and the lights on the deck glowed faintly against the water, I found myself alone again. The photo Grant had given me leaned against the cupcake box on the counter, both tokens, in different ways, of recognition long denied. My phone buzzed on the table. I froze. The name flashing across the screen made the air in my lungs go cold. Charles Blake. I didn't open the message right away. My thumb hovered, dread pressing like ice along my spine. Finally, I swiped. "If you've chosen to stand apart from this family, then remember, you've also chosen the consequences. No warmth, no apology, just threat wrapped in authority." The words pulsed against my skin. For years they would have shattered me, sent me scrambling to mend, to placate, to beg. Tonight, they only chilled. I set the phone down, stepping outside into the night. The lake stretched vast and dark, the wind carrying the scent of pine and water. I pulled my sweater tight, drawing strength from the steady boards beneath my feet, from the house that was mine in every sense. The threat lingered, cold as steel, but so did something stronger, the knowledge that I had survived every attempt to erase me. I wasn't erased, I wasn't currency, I wasn't an empty chair at their table, I was here, and I was staying. The call came on a grey Tuesday morning, rain streaking down the windows of my office. I almost let it go to voicemail when I saw Linda's name, but something in me, habit perhaps, made me swipe. Her voice trembled. "It's your father. He had a health scare last night. Nothing major, the doctor says. But he refuses to see a therapist, refuses to rest. Nora, I don't know what to do. You need to talk to him, for the family." I sat back in my chair, eyes on the rain sliding down the glass. The old script waited for me. Drop everything, soothe them, take responsibility for the chaos they created. But the spine I'd built inside myself held firm. "Mom," I said evenly, "I'll text you the number of a cardiologist I trust, and a therapist who specializes in men like Dad. But I can't fix him, and I won't pretend everything's fine just to save face." Her gasp was sharp. "Nora, please, you know how people talk. The family's reputation." "Reputation doesn't keep anyone alive," I cut in. "He has to want to take care of himself. That's not on me." Her silence stretched long, then broke into soft, strained sobs. "You've changed," she whispered. "Yes," I said. "I have." When the call ended, I sat for a long time with my hands folded, letting the storm outside mirror the storm within. I still loved them, in a twisted, aching way. But love didn't mean servitude. That evening, Jules stopped by my office, plopping into the chair opposite mine with her usual lack of ceremony. "You look like you've wrestled a ghost," she said, eyebrow arched. I told her about the call, about my refusal to be dragged back into the role of fixer. She listened quietly, then nodded approval. "Good. Boundaries are oxygen, Nora. You're finally breathing." But her expression shifted, shadow darkening her features. "There's something else you need to know." My stomach tightened. "What now?" She pulled out her phone, scrolling until she found a message. "A contact of mine at the Tribune tipped me off. Your family's been shopping around a story, claiming you used company money to buy the lake house." The words hit like ice water. "What?" "Total lie," Jules said quickly, leaning forward. "But you know how this works. If they find the right reporter, even a rumour could smear your reputation. You've built your career on trust, on credibility. They're trying to rip that away." I pressed my palms against my temples, a bitter laugh escaping. "So now I'm not just the forgotten daughter. I'm the threat they need to discredit." Jules reached across the desk, her hand firm on mine. "They're desperate. That means you're winning." I thought of Charles refusing therapy, clinging to control even as his body faltered, of Linda begging me to save face instead of saving his health. And now this, an attempt to poison the world I'd built for myself, to drag me down to the silence they'd always demanded. The old me would have broken, would have scrambled to prove my innocence, to please, to appease. But the woman sitting in that office was not the same girl who blew out lonely candles year after year. "I'll handle it," I said finally, my voice steady. Jules smiled grimly. "Damn right you will, and I'll help." That night at the lake house, I stood by the window, watching lightning flicker across the water. The house groaned softly in the wind, but it stood, solid, unmoved. I thought of my grandmother's letter, of Grant's restored photo, of the cupcake my mother had offered. Each piece told the story of fractures, but also of something else. Roots sinking deeper into the soil of my own life. They could whisper, they could scheme, they could even try to break me in print. But I had built something stronger than their legacy of erasure, and this time, when the storm passed, I would still be standing. Thanksgiving dawned crisp and clear, sunlight skimming across the lake like molten glass. My house smelled of cinnamon and sage, the air thick with the promise of a feast. For weeks I'd planned every detail: roast turkey, spiced pumpkin pie, extra chairs pulled around the long table on my deck. This year there would be no empty place settings waiting for apologies that never came. This year the table belonged to the people who chose me. By late afternoon, laughter already filled the air. Jules arrived with a tray of sweet potatoes, Ethan and his wife carried bottles of wine, Mrs. Whittaker shuffled in with a quilt draped over her arm as if warmth itself were a guest. My colleagues set dishes down with clattering cheer, their voices rising in playful arguments about football and dessert. When we finally sat, the deck glowed with string lights, glasses sparkling against the twilight. I looked around at the faces, my chosen family, stitched together not by blood, but by care, by presence, by belief in me. The ache that had once seemed permanent softened into something almost tender. Halfway through dinner, tires crunched on gravel, heads turned. Grant and Linda appeared, both holding foil-covered dishes. They paused at the edge of the light, hesitant, waiting. I rose slowly. "You're late," I said, not unkindly. Grant offered a sheepish smile. Traffic. Linda held up a casserole. Green beans. I thought it might go with the turkey. Her voice carried no rehearsed flourish, only quiet uncertainty. I nodded once. Come in. They slipped into the empty seats I'd set, not out of expectation, but out of possibility. The meal resumed, conversation weaving carefully around the new arrivals. No one demanded, no one overshadowed. For the first time, they sat as guests, not monarchs. After dessert, I stood and brought out an album. Not the ones I had left behind at the mansion, heavy with proof of absence. This one was new, its pages thick with photographs from the last year. I spread it open on the table. There was Jules holding balloons in my kitchen, Mrs. Whittaker laughing over cookies, Ethan raising a toast. The lake in every season, frozen silver in winter, green and restless in spring, gold in autumn light. Pages filled with faces smiling at me, not past me. Linda's fingers traced a picture of me on the deck, laughing mid-sentence, surrounded by colleagues. You look happy, she whispered. I am, I said. The silence that followed wasn't heavy, it was reverent. For once, no one could claim these moments, no one could erase them. They were mine, captured, undeniable. Later, as the night thinned and guests drifted inside for coffee, Grant lingered by the railing, the lake whispering dark beneath us. He leaned closer, his voice low. I haven't told anyone yet, he murmured, but I'm selling my shares in the company. I'm done carrying the family legacy. It's not worth the cost. The words shocked me, but beneath the surprise came something else, recognition. You're leaving? I asked softly. He nodded. They made me a symbol. I don't want to be a symbol anymore. Watching you, seeing you claim your own life. It showed me I could too. I studied his face, the shadows under his eyes, the weight lifting slowly. For years I had envied him, resented him, hated the way his spotlight erased me. But now I saw the cage he had been trapped in too. Maybe different bars, maybe gilded, but a prison all the same. Then maybe, I said, that's the real inheritance. Not the house, not the money, the courage to walk away. He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that belonged not to the air, but to the man beneath. Later, when the dishes were cleared and the last guests bundled into coats, I stepped onto the deck, alone. The lake shimmered under the stars, the air sharp with the smell of pine. I raised a glass of wine toward the reflection in the dark water. For so long I had disappeared to earn love. Tonight I stood visible, whole, unshaken. And for the first time I didn't toast to survival. I toasted to freedom.